we're going to continue with champion content, of course. And we have one of our original school partners, Miss Garnetta Penn, who's going to join us in just a moment. A little about Miss Garnetta. Garnetta is a veteran music educator who teaches and serves the Atlantic Public School System as the Metropolitan Opera HD Live in Schools teacher coordinator. She recently joined the faculty of Clark Atlanta University to conduct their premier vocal ensemble, the Philharmonic Society. And Garnetta received her Master of Music Education from the University of Georgia and her Bachelor of Arts in Music Education from Clark Atlanta University. And she's a firm believer in arts advocacy. She takes pride in encouraging and cultivating vocal artists through mentoring and coaching. And fun fact, Adrienne Moore, who played Black Cindy in Orange is the New Black, was in her music theater class in 1999, okay? So now we will pass it to Miss Garnetta to share with us this lesson. Take it away. Oh, Miss Garnett, I think we still have you on mute.
When you start working with your students with this opera, there are several things that you can do. That very first scene is one of my favorite scenes, and there's a strategy called visual thinking strategies that you could use with that strategy while asking your students, what do you see? What do you hear? What makes you think that? All of those things could be done as you introduce this opera to your students. So I'm going to jump right in and share with you some of the things that I'm going to do with my students as we prepare to go and see Champion. One of the first things that we are actually going to be doing is the book study, which started today, Man in the Ring. And I'm going to share with you some of the activities my students will be engaged in as we go through the book study. It is very heavy content. So my first disclaimer that I will make to you is that if you're going to take students to this opera, if you're going to do the book study with your students, please make sure that you share the disclaimer letter with your administration and your students that the Met Opera has provided us earlier in the month, in March, later in March. Please share that content letter with your admin and with your parents. It'll keep you out of trouble. It's heavy content, but it is important work. And I'm going to share with you today why. This particular story deals a lot with forgiveness, self-awareness, self-acceptance, and tolerance. The diversity and acceptance is a heavy thing that goes throughout this opera. The standards that I'm going to be approaching from, and even though I teach music, these are very valuable skills for your students to have, no matter whether it's a music class or life or content, core content. I want my students to be able to demonstrate an awareness and understanding of other cultural backgrounds, gender, identity, abilities, and differences. And the topics that I will be dealing with a lot will be understanding social awareness and perspectives. And so we're going to do our first activity. What do you see? In the chat, if you would share with us right now, can you tell me, what do you see? Take a few minutes or seconds. What the first thing that you see? So I see some people say they see birds, we see rabbits, we see ducks and rabbits. And so if you said that, you were not wrong, because if you look at it from this perspective, you might see a duck. But if you look at it from this perspective, with this being the eye, And these being the rabbit ears, you might see a rabbit. Secondly, let's try one more. What do you see? A fancy woman, a young woman, an old woman and a young woman. And if you saw any of those things, you are absolutely right. You have the fancy woman with a feather in her hair right here, looking this way. Then right here, if you look right here, this is her nose. This is the old woman's nose. The chin of the young woman is the old woman's nose. And then you will see the mouth of the old woman and her eyes right here. And she has some kind of hat on, or maybe that's her hair. I'm not sure. I sometimes it makes me wonder as well. But the reason why this activity is extremely important, and some people might say, why is perspective important? In this exercise, there is no right or wrong when we deal with matters of race, gender, sexuality, social identities. We must teach our students as a whole to be respectful of everyone. And this story actually helps us to kind of look at some of the of that in a nutshell. What does that mean? In this particular there is a word bank that I came up with that I wanted my students to have a handle on as we delve into this lesson. Um, we have the word that Emil was called a lot, Maricon, which is an insult in and of itself. And as the last presenter presented, he talked about, like when we were growing up, we didn't really hear people talking about bullying the way we see bullying done in our society right now. But bullying happens because people have bias. It's either implicit or it's explicit. What does that mean? And sometimes we put off our opinions on others because our perspective is different. Okay. And again, if you go back to the first exercise, there is no right or wrong, right? Intersectionality, where the road meets, where your opinion about the way life should be lived and the way somebody else might feel life should be lived may definitely have a different meaning. And I want to say this right now, that it is very important when we start talking about bias with our students, that we can't put our own biases off on our students. And it's a really great way of opening up that conversation, because it's really important in our world right now that we deal with those things. Haunted, because Emil was haunted by the actions of the fight. Even though he won, it still bothered him that Barrett died, so we have to also think about that. How are people haunted by the choices and the decisions and the consequences of one's actions? Self-awareness, reaction, acceptance, forgiveness, perspective, attack, demean, emasculate, belittle, taunted, insulted, and disparaged. These are words in and of themselves that can be discussed with your students in a very real way. And this story, the book study, you have to deal with it. You can't ignore it. You can't gloss over it. You have to deal with it. And so the word bank and concepts and the definitions that I just shared with you are some that you can start with. Now, I've also put together, and you guys will get this slide deck some videos that you can actually use with your classroom so that students can actually see some historical background about this whole story. That's not based on the book, but that's actual, real, factual video clips of Emil Griffith. That's the first two videos right here. They're very short clips. They are icebreakers. You can show them at the beginning of the class and it can start the discussion. Another really good video that I found was that the Met produces called Work in Process. That particular video is absolutely fascinating. It has, three of the actors talking about their experience and how they prepared for the opera. It has Terrence Blanchard talking about his experiences being the composer of the opera. And so that's another way in musically that you can, because those are firsthand accounts about what that process was all about. Another video that I found very interesting was the video that talked about the curtain. It is an amazing curtain, an amazing piece of art. And the young man behind the scenes who was responsible for that work talks about what that process was all about. So if you have art students who have a lot of interest in color and design and shading and things of that nature, he talks about all of that. And so it is a really great video. What Makes a Man is a video that's also on the Met website that also is another entry into having those discussions or critical discussions as you read the book. And then this past weekend, Terrence Blanchard does a one-on-one interview that was really, really impactful as well. So these are just ways that you can do a hook with your lesson as you unroll this opera to your students, out to your students. Next, in the Met Opera Guide, the Met Opera Education Guide, the philosophical chairs is where I started with my students before we started reading the book. We started on, today is Thursday, we started on Tuesday. So the activity that I did with my students was the philosophical chairs activity, and it's on page 31 in the Met Opera Guide, and you can also find it on the website. But this is one of the ways that we got to talking about the opera as a whole. Everyone has a secret. What type of secrets? You don't have to get too personal with kids, but sometimes students will say, "Yeah, I got one." You can't run away from your past. And so doing philosophical chairs was a really great way of giving them perspective as they started to approach the context of the book. If there was a student who did not want to read the book, we did give them that option because we used the letter at the beginning of it, or the forefront of beginning to work with this material, to make sure that everybody would be comfortable dealing with the material that this book unfolds. So philosophical chairs was a really great way for us to get into the book study part of what we're doing at my school. I make my students write. This is another thing that you can do, and we're going to do another activity right now. And so you can see three slides right now. And these are called theme exploration writing prompts. So we're going to take a few seconds right now. You're going to get 2 minutes. And I want you to, we're going to use the one at the very end where it says, "You're always with yourself, so you might as well enjoy the company." And I want you to take about 2 minutes and I want you to write down, what does that, how does that resonate with you? Be very reflectionary. And then I might ask a couple of people to share out in just a moment. You're always with yourself, so you might as well enjoy the company. So when we talk about the foreshadowing of Emil Griffith um, in the um, in the opera, it's because he struggles the rest of his life with the fact that that the last fight he did, that someone died. And so that kind of haunted him. So you're always with yourself, so you might as well enjoy the company. How does that resonate with you? Take a few minutes. Okay, so now what I'd like for you to do, just give yourself a moment. If you wrote something down and you don't mind sharing out, we only have time for maybe one. And I got a couple of people who are putting theirs in the chat. And so we'll just read a few of them out loud. We have Stan Stanfield said, allowing yourself to be and feel loved, love yourself, respect yourself. I like that. I'm always with myself, so it's my responsibility to live my life for myself and not someone else. No resentment. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll take one more. Is it one more? Allowing students to have a moment to be reflective as you do the work of champion is going to be really important, because it's going to hit home for a lot of students, because a lot of students don't feel accepted for whatever reason. They don't. And so what you have to do is you have to make room for them to be accepted or feel accepted in the classroom. Some of them it's going to be hard for. Some of them it's going to be very personal for them as they watch this story. But what I will tell you is that when we show that we respect everybody's opinion and perspective, you will go a long way in meeting that goal of self-awareness, tolerance, and really just um, showing students that everybody in your room has a voice and is welcome, and that life is supposed to be lived in safety and not in fear. And so what we want our students to know is that they're loved and that they're safe. And that is how I'm going to unfold um, um, champion. We're gonna use my one of my music classes that's going to go see the opera. We'll be doing research projects on the history of jazz. This is Jazz Education Month. So I would encourage you, if you want to go into jazz themes, my students are being allowed to choose the type of project, whether it's a paper or a PowerPoint or a timeline, focusing on some of the jazz styles that you're going to hear in the opera. And it's not just about the jazz, because this score is amazing. And I think you guys will be amazed by it. So just exploring the musical themes as well as the social awareness themes in the opera will make for a very good way to connect the students with what will happen on the screen. And I promise you, the boys are going to love it. It is action packed.